Racketeering can include a range of criminal acts such as fraud, bribery, money laundering, trafficking, sex trafficking, and more.
Including one instance of kidnapping during which Combs carried and displayed a firearm to a female victim, so that part.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs reportedly passed out in court after hearing that he could receive a life sentence according to a widely shared video.
Today for what we were calling a gag order, and I'm not going to walk out of court and do anything other than
listen to everybody, but you believe all proof.
Believe the facts.
This video is proof.
Hands down.
In a stunning courtroom appearance that left onlookers buzzing, Sean Diddy Combs, once a titan of the music and entertainment world, cut a shocking figure as he faced a laundry list of fresh allegations. The man who had once commanded global stages and red carpets now shuffled into a wood-paneled New York courtroom looking unrecognizable. Reports described his appearance as bloated and unkempt, with his tan prison-issued jumpsuit hanging loosely around his frame and a scruffy gray beard framing a face that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Gone was the polished magnet image of the Bad Boy Records mastermind. Instead, what stood before the court was a man visibly weathered by months of incarceration, legal battles, and public scrutiny.
Today, just to tell the truth, so hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. I'm 100%, the charges against me are 100% false, and hopefully due to time, we'll start to see that.
The scene unfolded to a packed gallery. Family members, including his mother Janice and children, sat quietly in support, their expressions a mix of concern and resilience. As Diddy entered the room, he greeted them with a faint smile and blew a two-handed kiss, a rare moment of warmth in an otherwise tense proceeding. But it wasn't long before the gravity of the situation took center stage. The hearing was to address the latest allegations against him, which painted a damning picture of a man accused of wielding power and influence in deeply troubling ways.
Pledged to give up his passport to prevent any quick getaways to tropical hideaways, and agreed to house arrest. He basically pleaded, "I'll stay locked at home. Just keep me out of jail." His lawyer also proposed regular illicit item tests, nightly visitor logs, and strict limits on female visitors, only allowing family members like his mom, daughters, and their mothers. Diddy was throwing down every card he had, doing whatever it took to convince the judge to release him.
Sean Diddy Combs ordered to stay behind bars. His lawyers offered up his Miami home, his mother's home, as well as collateral. Also, he would forfeit his passport, but it wasn't enough to keep him out of jail until trial.
Despite the impressive bail proposal, the judge refused to budge. And here's where things got dicey. The prosecution laid out a strong argument that Diddy wasn't exactly a guy you could trust to stay out of trouble. They dug into his past and revealed some pretty damaging information. One standout detail was a series of unsettling old texts. In one message from 2016, Diddy seemed desperate, practically begging for help. He'd just been seen on camera in a hotel with ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and in a panic he texted, "Call me, the cops are here. I got 6 kids, please call. I'm surrounded. You're going to abandon me all alone?" The texts painted a picture of someone who could get manipulative when things got heated.
The video is completely deceptive despite the bombastic title. No collapse was observed and no life sentence was given. Rather, beneath the dramatic images is a tale of courtroom wrangling, unrelenting accusations, and an intense legal drama that is barely getting started. As we dissect this situation, we want to know if Diddy has been caught lying in court again, what evidence does the judge have, how serious these accusations are, and whether his defense team can withstand the growing body of evidence. Let's examine the specifics that show the actual mayhem hidden beneath the news stories Sean Diddy Combs recently suffered too. The video is completely deceptive despite the bombastic title. No collapse was observed, and no life sentence was given. Rather, beneath the dramatic images is a tale of courtroom wrangling, unrelenting accusations, and an intense legal drama that is barely getting started. As we dissect this situation, we want to know if Diddy has been caught lying in court again, what evidence does the judge have, how serious these accusations are, and whether his defense team can withstand the growing body of evidence. Let's examine the specifics that show the actual mayhem hidden beneath the news stories. Sean Diddy Combs recently suffered too.
Was just hit with 2 new federal charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering case. With trials set to start in just weeks, we're going to break down what the government is now alleging with their 3rd superseding indictment, and also the government's new request of the court to protect the identities of certain alleged victims who plan to testify. When employees, witnesses to his abuse, or others threaten Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence included arson and multiple acts of kidnapping, including 1 instance of kidnapping during which Combs carried and displayed a firearm to a female victim, so that part is new. In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. On one occasion, Combs dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony. Now, that addition, Nima, of female and female, to clarify that, this is not, in fairness, this is not a paper from my doctoral thesis where I want to make sure everything is as specific as possible. Why does it matter? Why do they have to add female victim? If aren't they going to argue that anyway at trial? I don't understand why they had to be so precise there.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a female or a male. We're talking about RICO predicate acts, right? So obviously under the statute, you have to have 2 or more of these acts, and we've gone through them: kidnapping, arson, extortion, other crimes of violence. But it can be to a male, it could be to a female. I don't think that's going to change the case one way or another. So you're right, Jesse, it's not necessary to identify whether the victim was male or female.
Legal drama, the stakes for Sean Diddy Combs are quite high since the accusations against him go beyond simple accusations. They are a ticking time bomb that, if detonated in a conviction, might keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Can you imagine having to deal with the demise of your empire, as well as the terrible prospect of spending decades, or maybe your whole life behind bars? The threat of a life sentence looms over every court appearance, and some claim that the mere idea of it may have caused him to falter with the.
While fast approaching prosecutors are adding to their case, now hitting the former rap mogul with additional sex trafficking charges. ABC News' chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky is here with those details. Good morning, Aaron.
And good morning, Janae. Sean Combs is set to go on trial 1 month from today, and the case against him just got a little bigger. This morning, Sean Diddy Combs faces 2 additional criminal charges a month before he's scheduled to stand trial in New York. Federal prosecutors charged Combs with an additional count of sex trafficking and an additional count of transportation to engage in prostitution. Both relate to an individual referred to in court papers as Victim 2. Combs previously pleaded not guilty to 1 count of each of those charges, as well as the most serious charge he faces, racketeering conspiracy.
For Sean Combs, the challenge in this new superseding indictment is that any one alleged victim could amount to serious prison time. He would have to disprove each and every one of the 4 alleged victims, because if even one is believed, he could serve life behind bars.
Combs now faces a total of 5 federal counts that could get him decades in prison if convicted. His attorneys are downplaying the new indictment, saying in a statement these are not new allegations or new accusers. These are the same individuals, former long-term girlfriends who were involved in consensual relationships. This was their private sex life, defined by consent, not coercion. But the indictment says Combs lured women under the pretense of a romantic relationship into engaging in sexual encounters. And when he didn't get his way, prosecutors allege Combs kidnapped a woman, flashed a gun, and dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony.
Rapper Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is now set to begin next year, and prosecutors are hinting that they could potentially bring new charges against the music mogul.
Chanley Payne are here with all the details. Chan.
Hey, Todd and Carly. So May 5th, 2025, that is the day Sean Diddy Combs' trial is expected to begin. And according to those inside the federal courtroom yesterday, Combs was all smiles, wearing a jail uniform and shackled at the ankles. And at one point, he turned towards the gallery, waving and blowing kisses to his family, who showed up to support him, including his mother and many of his children. Combs was arrested in September on several charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, where he faces a possible sentence of 15 years to life behind bars if convicted. And during yesterday's hearing, attorneys discussed issues regarding the evidence discovery process, including the data extraction of nearly 100 electronic devices seized during searches of Combs' residences. Prosecutors making clear in court, quote, "Our investigation is very much ongoing," and they hinted that additional charges against the music mogul are possible. But here's what his defense team told reporters after court.
He's making an adjustment. He had his family here today to support him. We really want to put an end to all of the clowning that we see on the internet. This is a serious proceeding with serious consequences, and all of us are addressing it accordingly.
Combs is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn.
That goes beyond his earlier accusations. Combs is currently being accused of sex trafficking, racketeering, coercing, and abusing women, a sinister list of offenses that, if confirmed, would demonstrate systematic exploitation. According to the indictment, he coerced women into engaging in commercial sex acts by using his richest position and authority. In one particularly startling allegation, he reportedly hung a victim over a hotel balcony. These are not isolated occurrences, rather they are a part of a larger story that points to a lengthy history of manipulation and abuse.
New York have filed their third superseding indictment against Sean Diddy Combs. The new indictment adds an additional charge of sex trafficking and an additional charge of transportation to engage in prostitution. That could mean additional prison time if Diddy's convicted. Chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky is here with more on that. So, Aaron, what's the latest on this indictment?
Third one. And these new charges, these new counts, he's already faced sex trafficking and the prostitution charges, relate to a different victim, a victim number 2. We don't know who that is, not identified in court papers, but we know there are a total of 3 alleged victims who form the basis of the criminal case against Sean Combs. So now with the additional counts, it brings the total number of charges that Diddy is facing to 5. So he's looking at the possibility, as you say, of extra prison time potentially if he's convicted of those.
So what's next in this case now? And any response from Diddy?
We haven't heard yet. We've asked Diddy's team for any kind of a response. He has previously pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution charges, along with the big count against him, the racketeering conspiracy that exposes him potentially to the most prison time if he's convicted. His legal team, I would imagine, would say the same thing, that he didn't do any of this. And the next step is for him to go on trial. It's scheduled to begin on May 5th with jury selection and opening statements on May 12th.
Is it possible that this is all in reference to Dawn Richard? Maybe. Although I will tell you, she didn't, in her lawsuit, necessarily allege that she engaged in sex acts per se with Sean Combs. She said that he assaulted her. Although I will tell you, she did indicate in her lawsuit that Combs' assistant, so an employee, engaged in group sex with Combs and other men. But why add this specific paragraph in a superseding indictment, right? Well, maybe supporting her potential testimony as a key witness in the case, or whoever will testify. And what you are seeing, though, is how much prosecutors may be relying on forced labor to support their underlying racketeering charge. Remember, this is the main charge of this case. It's a charge that carries potentially up to life in prison. So they really, really want to get Sean Combs on this. And in order to get to racketeering conspiracy, count 1, prosecutors need to show underlying crimes to get to that charge, need to show the criminal enterprise. What were the illicit activities this alleged criminal enterprise were involved in? And forced labor may be a more straightforward way to get there. And to give you an idea about what we're talking about with forced labor, this is how it's defined under the United States Code. Whoever knowingly provides or obtains the labor or services of a person by any one of or by any combination of the following means, by means of force, threats of force, physical restraint, or threats of physical restraint.
With the RICO Act, or corrupt organizations, it was first intended to destroy organized crime. RICO makes it possible for prosecutors to connect multiple illegal acts into a single comprehensive conspiracy. This implies that Diddy might be held liable for all crimes done under the purported criminal network's auspices. If the jury finds him guilty of even leading or taking part in it, this legal approach raises the stakes significantly because it focuses on a pattern of behavior spanning over 20 years rather than a single infraction. The Federal Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO, was enacted between 1961 and 1968.
Refers to the Federal Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which is codified in 18 U.S.C. 1961 through 1968. RICO is the federal law that was originally designed to combat organized crime. It allows for both criminal and civil actions against individuals or organizations engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity. Racketeering can include a range of criminal acts such as fraud, bribery, money laundering, trafficking, sex trafficking, and more. Then to prove a RICO violation, the prosecutor must first show that the defendants had an enterprise, and an enterprise is any group of people associated with each other for a common purpose. Second, there needs to be a pattern of racketeering activity, which means at least 2 acts of racketeering within a 10-year period. These are known as predicate acts. And third, there has to be a connection between the defendant and the management of the enterprise through the illegal activities. And passing the RICO statute wasn't so much about being tougher on any individual crime, but about being able to prosecute crimes that were often hard to prosecute. And the indictment says that, quote, the Combs enterprise consisted of Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, entities within the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, individuals employed by and associated with the Combs business, and others known and unknown. The indictment claims the purpose of the enterprise was operating a global business in the media entertainment, and as part of that goal, the enterprise devoted itself preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power, reputation, and brand of Sean Combs. The indictment says Combs demanded, quote, absolute loyalty, and the people involved in the enterprise sought to enrich themselves, and Combs rewarded, quote, those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crimes. As to the third element, according to the government, Combs was the leader of the enterprise, and he directed his associates to, quote, lure female victims into his orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Now, these next allegations are pretty graphic, so you might want to skip ahead to this time code if it might upset you. Now, Combs apparently recorded these freak-off sessions. The indictment says the freak-offs sometimes lasted for several days in a row. Quote, during freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept video he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and to pull this off, Combs needed the cooperation of dozens of people. And the indictment says just about everyone in his orbit was in on it. Quote, supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees. These employees were responsible for the logistics, like booking hotel rooms, setting up lighting, stocking the rooms with lubricant and linens, arranging travel for the victims, and delivering IVs and cash. Now, you're probably wondering whether these people could face charges for participating in these events. Well, hold that thought because we'll get there. But during the freak-offs, the victims were subjected to serious physical abuse, including punching, kicking, dragging, and having objects thrown at them. At times, their injuries took weeks to heal. And Combs maintained control over the victims by, quote, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances.
And is codified in 18 U.S.C. RICO, is originally intended to combat organized crime. The federal law, it permits both criminal and civil lawsuits to be brought against people or groups that engage in a pattern of racketeering a variety of illegal activities, including fraud, bribery, money laundering, trafficking, sex trafficking, and more can be considered bracketing. Additionally, the prosecutor must first demonstrate that the defendants had an enterprise in order to establish a RICO offense. Second, there must be a pattern of racketeering behavior, which entails at least P. Diddy PT or Love the defendant's development and removing the layers of deceit. An enterprise is any group of persons connected to one another for a shared objective. Click the like or subscribe buttons to enable notifications.